Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. People who have lived in the same place for a long time without moving generally know their neighbors well. They understand whom to trust and to what extent, and whom it's better to stay away from. Sometimes neighbors living side by side for years become closer than some family members. They are asked to look after the house and property while the family is away on vacation or traveling. They invite each other over and, without a second thought, allow their children to accept treats from these individuals. However, sometimes the person who has lived next door for many years can turn out to be a real maniac who has just been waiting for the right moment. The case of Diana Garnica became one of the most sensational in Argentina in recent years. A lot of effort and time went into the investigation. The criminal could have escaped punishment, as there was almost no direct evidence against him. He did not admit his guilt, and the victim's body was never found. Who is Diana Garnica? Family. Early years. Diana Abigail Garnica Cisneros was born on March 30th, 2000, in the province of Tucumán, in the town of Villa Mariano Moreno El Colmena, Argentina. She grew up in a poor large family, where she was the youngest daughter and the seventh second-to-last child of her parents. Her parents, Ramon Garnica and Elizabeth Susana Cisneros, worked hard to provide for their many children and create at least somewhat comfortable living conditions for them. As the youngest girl in the family, Diana was everyone's favorite. Her parents adored her, and her older brothers and sisters took care of her. She did well in school, was talented in drawing, and from a young age loved to dance. She was unusually intelligent and sensible for her age, never lied to her family, had no secrets from her mother and father, and was very close to her older sister Sonia, who essentially took care of her upbringing while their parents were at work. Since the Garnica family was quite religious, the parents, along with their children, regularly attended church and tried to live honestly and correctly. The older children also began working from their teenage years to help their parents somewhat. The younger ones kept the house in order, and each had their responsibilities, which they were accountable for. Diana dreamed of becoming a doctor in the future because she always aimed to help those around her, was very kind, sensitive, and responsive. She hoped to build a successful career, help her family, and said that she would buy her parents a big house where her mom could plant a garden with flowers and fruit trees that she always dreamed of. Unfortunately, these dreams were never to be realized. Moving to a new city, parents' divorce. In 2013, after Ramon lost his job due to worsening financial troubles, the family was forced to move to Juan Bautista Alberti, located in the same province of Tucumán. The move was extremely difficult for them, and initially their problems only increased. The relationship between the spouses, who had been together for over 2 decades, quickly deteriorated. They began to argue constantly, and eventually decided that they could no longer stay together. The divorce was a severe shock for all the children, but the younger ones felt it most acutely. Diana, upon learning what had happened, was simply devastated. The world of a 13-year-old girl crumbled in an instant, and she simply could not understand what would happen next. Despite the separation, the father continued to support his ex-wife and children, but he soon started another family. Elizabeth also struggled greatly with the divorce, but her children supported her, and she was fortunate to find a decent job with a reasonable salary for that area. Gradually, the family adapted to their new reality, settled into their new home, made friends, and established good relationships with nearby residents. Across from the Garnica family lived a certain Dario Javier Suarez. He was a very pleasant, friendly, and kind 36-year-old man. He lived with his wife, Yasmina Alejandra Villarreal, with whom he was raising 4 children. He also had 2 children from previous relationships and 1 child out of wedlock. It's noteworthy that Dario and his family moved to Juan Bautista Alberti just 6 months before the Garnicas settled there. Perhaps that's why they quickly became close friends, as they were newcomers to the area. Previously, Suarez had lived in the province of Santiago del Estero, in the northern part of Argentina. Dario, along with his wife, 2 brothers, and some other relatives, worked at a local brick factory, located just a mile from their home. His children were about the same age as Diana and her siblings. They attended the same school, quickly found common ground, and became friends. The adults also got along well, allowing their children to visit each other. Even staying overnight, celebrated family events together, and became almost like family. Sonia and Diana even babysat the youngest neighbor's children while their parents were at work. First, job and teenage romance. After the divorce, Ramon did what he could to help his ex-wife and older children, but after he started a new family, he nearly stopped sending money. The mother's job, although it provided a stable income, was disastrously insufficient for a large family. The family even started a small business making and selling homemade baked goods, but it quickly failed. The situation became so dire that in her upper school years, Diana had to drop out of school to start working and help her mother. The 16-year-old girl took a job as a caregiver, looking after an elderly ill person. Since she wanted to become a doctor in the future, Garnica thought this experience would be beneficial. Despite her young age, she approached her job with full seriousness and responsibility. She precisely followed all instructions, monitored the medication schedule, performed necessary hygiene procedures, and cooked diet-specific meals, adhering to recommendations developed by the treating doctor. Diana liked her job. She felt needed and useful, strived to do everything right, and was highly valued for it. She worked nearly every day from morning to evening, but still faithfully attended church on Sundays with her mother and sisters. She also entered into a romantic relationship with a boy they had previously gone to school with. Sometimes in the evenings, the young couple walked in the park, simply talking and enjoying each other's company. Nevertheless, Diana adhered to the strict rules and schedules set by her mother. She always returned home by 10 o'clock in the evening, did not stay out at night, never went anywhere without informing her family where and with whom she would be, and when she would return. Sometimes, she went to the city market with the neighbors and their children to buy necessities, but her mother always knew about such trips. Dario treated the neighbor's girl like his own daughter, took care of her, and even occasionally spoiled her with small gifts. When the man learned that she had a boyfriend, he paternalistically gave her advice about how boys could be deceitful and warned her not to let him deceive her or take advantage of her naivety and innocence. The girl shared this conversation with her mother, from whom she still had no secrets. Elizabeth found the neighbor's behavior somewhat strange, but she decided that it was his way of showing care, as he also had teenage daughters the same age as Diana, a strange request. On May 6, 2017, in the late afternoon, Diana unexpectedly received a call from her neighbor, who expressed a desire to help her family out of the goodness of his heart. At that time, Garnica was indeed in desperate need of money, but she was expecting a bonus soon, which she planned to spend on getting a dental prosthesis for her mom and starting repairs on their home's roof, which had started leaking after a recent rainstorm. However, Dario suddenly mentioned that he wanted to buy an air conditioner for Elizabeth as a gift and asked Diana to accompany him to help choose the right one. He insisted that Diana should not tell her mother about it because he wanted it to be a surprise, which wouldn't be possible if she knew. He set up a meeting place and once again extracted a promise from her that she would tell no one. At the moment she received this odd call, Diana was just returning home from work. The neighbor urged her to go with him right away, but she said she needed to drop off groceries she'd bought on the way home and change her clothes. Upon arriving home, she naturally told her mother everything, as she never lied or kept secrets from her. The woman found it odd too. Although they were on good terms with the neighbors, they had never done anything like this before. Elizabeth wanted to call Dario herself to thank him and decline the gift, as an air conditioner was not a necessity for their family. However, her daughter convinced her not to do so, saying she would go to the store as promised, but would decline the expensive purchase. The girl reassured her mother that everything would be fine and that she would return home not too late. At that moment, the neighbor sent a text message to Diana's phone, stating he was already waiting for her and again requested that she tell no one about their meeting to keep the surprise. Diana replied that she was on her way out, but then noticed that her phone was almost dead. She decided to leave it at home to charge. She met Dario at the agreed place, and that was the last time anyone saw her. Mysterious disappearance. When her daughter hadn't returned home by the evening, Elizabeth grew worried, especially since she couldn't call her because the phone was left at home. The woman waited a little longer, but as it grew dark, she started to panic. She first called her eldest daughter, Sonia, and told her everything, but she tried to reassure her mother, assuring her that her sister would return home soon and that nothing bad could have happened. As it got completely dark, the mother heard the sound of the neighbor's motorcycle, which pulled up to the house across the street. She thought Dario and her daughter had returned, so she breathed a sigh of relief. However, 5, 10, 20 minutes passed, and the girl still hadn't entered the house. Then the woman went outside and saw that the neighbor was alone. She approached him and asked about Diana, but he seemed surprised and said he didn't know anything about her. Hadn't seen her that day. Elizabeth was stunned. She didn't know what to think and couldn't understand whether the neighbor was lying or if her daughter had deceived her for the first time in her life and gone somewhere else. However, the man insisted on his story and even handed her his phone to confirm he hadn't contacted her daughter. Naturally, by that time, he had already deleted all calls and messages. Dario also expressed concern about the girl's whereabouts and even offered to drive around the neighborhood with her mother to look for her and ask neighbors and the teenager's friends if they had seen anything suspicious. However, the woman declined his help, deciding to start the search herself with her older children. They walked around the neighborhood until late at night, questioning everyone they met along the way and calling all of the girl's friends and acquaintances. But no one had seen her that day. Returning home, Elizabeth decided to check her daughter's phone and saw 2 missed calls and a message from the neighbor as her daughter had not deleted them. Fully convinced that Dario was lying, the woman decided to go to the police and also called her ex-husband to inform him that their youngest daughter had vanished without a trace. The man lived several hundred miles from his ex-wife's home, but upon hearing the alarming news, he immediately drove to her to help search for their daughter. Police indifference and the horrific scene at the brick factory. When a worried woman arrived at the police station in the middle of the night with a report of her daughter's disappearance, the officers did not take the matter seriously. They assumed that the girl had probably run off with her boyfriend or gone to a party with friends and would return home by morning. Elizabeth shared her suspicions about the neighbor and even showed the calls and messages on her daughter's phone. But the officers dismissed her concerns, saying they would not start a search until at least 24 hours had passed. Realizing they could only rely on themselves, the Garnica family organized a massive search effort. By that time, the father had already arrived from another city, and together they went to the neighbor's house to have a serious talk. However, the house was empty, dark, and quiet, and no one responded to their knocks. The family then went to the brick factory where the neighbor worked with his relatives. And there, the relatives of the missing girl made a dreadful discovery. Since Dario was the senior member of his crew, he had keys to the factory and could access it even when it was closed. That night the lights were on, and when the girl's relatives entered, they encountered a horrifying scene. The brick-making furnaces were on, though it was a day off and the factory was supposed to be closed. Moreover, all the adult members of the neighbor's family were present. They appeared agitated and were clearly in the process of burning something in the furnaces. The Garnicas were struck by a terrible suspicion. Dario was not in the factory, and when they asked his relatives where he was and what was happening, those present tried to deflect, saying they were preparing equipment for operation and conducting maintenance, and mentioned that the man had just been there and might have stepped out to the restroom. However, within the few minutes that this conversation lasted, the suspect managed to leave the factory through the back door, secretly escaping. Search for evidence and arrest of suspects. After the frightening scene at the factory and the strange behavior of Dario's relatives, the missing girl's family decided to contact the prosecutor's office. By that time, almost 24 hours had passed since the teenager's disappearance, and the investigation was supposed to begin. However, it turned out that no information from the police station where the parents had reported the girl's disappearance had reached them. This situation outraged and angered prosecutor Claudio Banari, who took the case under his personal control and promised to punish the police officers who had neglected their duties. His first action was to request a warrant to search Dario's home and the brick factory. However, since it was Sunday and the judicial system was unavailable, the prosecutor, not wanting to waste precious time, decided to organize everything under his own responsibility. Banari suspected that the suspect might have attacked the teenager, assaulted her, and then ended her life, asking his relatives for help to dispose of the body and evidence. He found it suspicious that Dario's entire family was in the factory on their day off in the middle of the night and had inexplicably started the furnaces. The calls and messages from the man to his young neighbor's phone also appeared suspicious. As the family searched for the girl, including through social media, the case quickly received wide publicity, leading to various speculations and guesses. For instance, a theory widely circulated that the young beauty could have been kidnapped to be sold into slavery in a brothel or for organs. One woman even accused a specific person, although it later turned out she was just trying to settle scores with an ex-boyfriend and send him to prison. The search of the suspect's house yielded no results. Obviously, he had not brought the girl there, and the crime had occurred elsewhere. No traces were found at the brick factory either, but Banari did not rule out that the furnaces could have been used as a crematorium to destroy the body and evidence. However, these were only guesses and hypotheses. Nevertheless, the prosecutor initiated the arrest of Dario, using the data from the missing girl's phone as a key argument. His brothers Caesar and Marcus, his wife, sister, mother-in-law, and some other relatives were also arrested as possible accomplices. During interrogation, the suspect denied all charges against him, claiming he had not seen the neighbor and had not communicated with her that day. However, based on data analysis from his phone, as well as gadgets belonging to his relatives and the victim, clear discrepancies in their statements were identified. The man was charged with unlawful detainment, possible assault, and depriving the girl of her life, while his relatives were accused of criminal conspiracy and complicity. All suspects were sent to jail for 3 months during the investigation. The search for Diana. Despite the police's initial disbelief that the missing girl would be found alive, her parents continued to hope for the best. They involved an increasing number of people in the search, organized marches and rallies, engaged the media in the investigation, and demanded that Dario confess where their daughter was and what he had done to her. In desperation, the parents sought audiences with the then Ministers of Security and Justice to influence the investigation and pressure the suspect into making a statement. Although the missing girl's relatives were received by the highest state structures, unfortunately, this did not reflect in practice. Over 200 police officers were involved in the search, as well as service dogs and special equipment, including helicopters and search drones. But there were still no results. Alarming discoveries. At a brick factory in one of the kills during a second inspection, a strange, severely melted metal object was found, along with a tooth fragment. It was suspected that this object was the piercing the missing girl wore in her nose. However, special forensic analysis was required to confirm this, and it would take time. While law enforcement awaited the results, another more thorough search was conducted at Dario's house, where notebooks belonging to the man were found containing quite suspicious notes. These appeared to be sort of personal diaries from which it was revealed that the man was literally obsessed. His young neighbor. Everything started when the family moved in next door to his house. At that time, she was only 13 years old. The suspect did not write anything specific about what he wanted to do with the girl, but the notes made it clear that she drove him mad. He thought about her every day for years and periodically wrote letters addressed to the neighbor, in which he confessed his love in a peculiar form. After studying all the notes, investigators concluded that the man's obsession only grew over time, and he could no longer control his vile desires. In one of the last letters, he addressed the girl with words implying that she would eventually belong to him, and he would grant her eternal peace and tranquility. This entry looked like a direct threat, indicating that Dario might indeed have taken advantage of her and then dealt with her. The disappearance of physical evidence. It seemed that based solely on the entries from the diaries, the case could be brought to court, but the results of the forensic analysis were still pending. When Banari tried to find out the reason for the delay, it turned out that the evidence had simply disappeared. It was impossible to conduct a DNA analysis of the tooth fragment to determine if it belonged to the missing girl or to establish what the strange metal object was. Subsequently, the prosecutor decided to classify information about the investigation's progress, and the police officers responsible for preserving the evidence were immediately fired and also detained for criminal negligence and possible assistance to the suspects. The investigation itself, after this egregious incident, came under the direct control of federal authorities. Moreover, it soon emerged that part of the records found in the suspect's home had also disappeared. Among these was the last letter in which he promised to grant the girl eternal rest. Without these pieces of evidence, the case could simply fall apart and the criminal and his accomplices might escape punishment. However, no measures helped determine where the physical evidence had vanished to. 3 months later, the detention period for the suspects expired, but bringing the case to court without key evidence was risky and evidently threatened a loss. What remained were data from the girl's phone and testimony from a random witness who saw the suspect and the missing girl walking together on the street on the day she disappeared. Dario's lawyer demanded that the entire investigation be declared invalid and his client be immediately released, as well as the search results annulled, since they were conducted without a special warrant. The court only partially granted the defense's request. The main suspect remained in custody, but all his relatives were released, as nothing specific could be charged against them. However, in May 2019, 2 years after the girl's disappearance, Dario was also released. Over that time, the investigation had not progressed, no new evidence had emerged, and the body had not been found. The long-awaited trial and verdict. Although the main suspect was set free, the case was not closed, and the investigation continued. Occasionally, evidence and testimonies emerged suggesting Diana might still be alive. For instance, a banknote was found with a plea for help allegedly written by the girl. However, handwriting analysis established that the writing did not belong to the missing girl. Only in June 2021, more than 4 years after the girl's disappearance, prosecutor Banari finally managed to bring this challenging case to court. But the process was constantly delayed due to the global pandemic raging worldwide, and the Garnica family felt increasingly disheartened. The relatives no longer hoped for a favorable outcome, or that the guilty would face deserved punishment. The trial only began in April 2023, 6 years after the crime was committed, with the culprit finally appearing in court. By that time, the missing entries from Dario's diaries, which everyone believed were lost forever, had been found. These became the key pieces of evidence proving the man's guilt. However, additional expert analysis was required to verify the authenticity of these documents. In addition to this, 2 new witnesses appeared in the case. One was Dario's former lover, who claimed he had seduced her when she was still a teenager. She also asserted that the suspect always had a weakness for young girls, and she was far from the only one he had treated this way. The second witness was a neighbor of Caesar, Dario's brother and probable accomplice. According to him, on the night of the girl's disappearance, the brothers arrived together on a motorcycle with a strange large bundle in the sidecar, took some tools from a shed, and then left together. The witness had remained silent for so long because he feared Caesar could harm his family, as he was always volatile and aggressive. The defendant never admitted his guilt, claiming he would never harm the neighboring girl, to whom he felt as though she were his daughter. Nonetheless, the few pieces of evidence were sufficient to render a guilty verdict. The body of the missing girl was never found, and the events of that fateful day were painstakingly reconstructed, establishing that the man lured, took advantage of the teenager, and then ended her life and disposed of the remains, likely with the help of his relatives. On May 2, 2023, Dario was found guilty of the abduction, taking advantage of and ending the life of Diana. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His brother Caesar, as well as any other relatives, could not be held accountable. Never thought my first real job would come with nightmares. I moved to the city thinking it would be the start of something new, something better. Fresh out of college, I had dreams, plans, and ambition. But reality hit me hard. I ran out of money in a month. No one was hiring in my field, and I had bills to pay. Rent wasn't going to wait for my dream job to show up. So I walked into the nearest place that had a now hiring sign, a Dunkin' Donuts at the corner of a busy street. It wasn't my dream, but it kept the lights on. The first few weeks were tough, but eventually I found a rhythm, and I found Nina. She started a week after me, and we clicked instantly. It wasn't just about work. We got each other. She had her own struggles. Kicked out at 18, she had to hustle for everything. We supported each other, laughed at dumb customer orders, and spent slow nights gossiping behind the counter. We even convinced our manager to always schedule us together. Working with her made the job bearable, but then he started showing up. Every Friday evening, without fail, the man in the dirty green jacket and ripped blue trousers. He always ordered the same thing, a cappuccino and a single chocolate ring donut. At first, I barely noticed him. We had our fair share of weird regulars, but something about him felt off. He never spoke more than necessary, never took his eyes off us. And it wasn't the kind of casual glance I was used to as a woman. It was something darker. It made my stomach turn. Nina felt it too. One night after he left, she whispered, "I think he watches us." Like, really watches us. I laughed it off. But deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. Then came the night everything changed. It was a rainy Friday. Closing shift, just me, Nina, and him. The store was empty. Our manager had already left. It was just us behind the counter waiting for the clock to hit 11 p.m. so we could lock up. But he wouldn't leave. I was getting annoyed. Why the hell is he still here? Then, as if he read my mind, he stood up and walked to the counter. "Need anything else?" I asked, forcing a polite smile. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there staring. Then finally he spoke. "I'm not hungry." The silence stretched between us. Something felt wrong. Then he smirked. "But I am horny." I felt nauseous. He started laughing. "Come on, I'm joking. Relax." Nina shifted uncomfortably beside me. My hands curled into fists under the counter. "I've been coming here for a while now," he continued, "and I noticed a really pretty girl behind this counter. I'd love to get to know her better." I opened my mouth to tell him off, but then he added, "Not you." His eyes locked onto Nina. "Her." She froze. "Come on, sweetheart," he grinned. "Just your number." Then I noticed something. His hand inside his pants. My stomach flipped. "Get the FV out." My voice came out sharper than I expected. Nina backed away, panic flashing across her face. He chuckled, "No need to be rude." Then he moved. He lunged at Nina. I reacted before I could think. I shoved him back with all my strength. He stumbled, crashed over the counter, and hit the ground hard. "Run!" I screamed. We ran without looking back. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot across the street. The rain was pouring, cold and relentless, but my body was burning with adrenaline. Nina was shaking, her breath ragged. She kept looking over her shoulder, expecting him to come after us. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called our manager. "What? What happened?" he asked, half asleep. I told him everything. The staring, the disgusting comment, the way he touched himself right in front of us, and how he tried to grab Nina. "Call the cops," I shouted, my voice breaking. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. They took our statements, asked some routine questions, then told us the usual. "We'll look into it." But I saw it in their faces. They weren't taking it seriously. For the next few days, we tried to move on, tried to forget. The manager reviewed the security footage, but the angle was bad. You couldn't see him touching himself, and the audio was too muffled to hear his disgusting words. "We can ban him," the manager said, scratching his head. "If he comes back, just call the cops again." That was it. Nina and I were furious, but what else could we do? The first couple of nights, neither of us could sleep. Every time the door chimed at work, I flinched, expecting him to walk in. But he didn't come back. A week passed, then two. I started to believe maybe, just maybe, he was gone for good. Until the night Nina disappeared. It was another closing shift, just me and her. We were cleaning up, laughing about something stupid when she grabbed her pack of cigarettes and said, "I'll be back in 10. I nodded, barely looking up. But 10 minutes passed, then 20. By the time it hit 30, I knew something was wrong. I checked the back door, pushed it open. Nina. Silence. Then I saw it. Her cigarette, still lit, lying on the ground. My stomach dropped. I ran back inside and grabbed my phone. Called her. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I called my manager, then the police. By the time they arrived, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely speak. They searched the area. Up and down the street, every alley, nothing. She was gone, like she had just vanished. Days passed, every hour felt like hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept hoping Nina would walk through that door, laughing, saying it was all a stupid misunderstanding. But then the call came. They found her in the woods, stripped half naked, beaten, violated. Murdered. I don't remember much after that. Just my manager's voice cracking as he told me. Just the way the world seemed to blur. The police found the man not far from the crime scene, living in some old rotting trailer. It was him. Of course, it was him. They arrested him. He confessed, said he had been watching her for months, waiting. He got life in prison. But that didn't fix anything, didn't bring her back. Didn't take away the nightmares, the guilt, the constant paranoia. I quit Dunkin the next day. I could never set foot in that place again. Nina should have been safe, she should have been here, but she wasn't, and I'll never forgive myself for that. It was 11:45 p.m. when Rachel pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of the Dunkin' Donuts, where she had been working the night shift for the past few weeks. The place always felt different after dark. Its bright fluorescent lights humming against the silence, casting long, sharp shadows over the empty booths and tiled floor. She sighed, checking her phone before stepping out. A text from her roommate Liv. "Be safe. Call if anything weird happens." Rachel smirked. Liv always worried too much. Shoving her phone into her pocket, she grabbed her bag and walked toward the glass doors. Inside, the familiar scent of coffee and warm pastries greeted her. The store was mostly quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of cars on the highway. Her co-worker, Steve, was wiping down the counters looking half asleep. "Hey, you're early," he said, stifling a yawn. "Yeah, figured I'd get a head start," Rachel replied, tying her apron. Steve nodded. "Lucky you. It's been dead all night. 1 or 2 cars at the drive-thru. That's it." He checked his watch. "Almost midnight. You good to lock up behind me?" Rachel gave a thumbs up. "Go home, man." "I got it." With a quick goodbye, Steve clocked out and left. Rachel locked the door behind him, glancing outside. The parking lot was still empty, the street lights buzzing under the dark sky. She turned off the lobby lights, leaving only the glow from the kitchen in the drive-thru area. Around 1:30 a.m., Rachel was in the back, checking inventory. When she heard it tap, 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 a slow, deliberate tapping against the glass window at the front of the store, her body stiffened. She waited, listening. Nothing. Probably just the wind, she thought. Still, her heart was pounding as she walked toward the counter. Peering out, she saw nothing. Just the empty parking lot, the dim glow of the streetlights stretching into the darkness beyond. She exhaled, shaking her head. "You're getting paranoid," she muttered to herself. Grabbing a rag, she started wiping down the coffee machines. The clock ticked past 2 a.m. The store was silent except for the occasional gurgle of the coffee pots. Then tap, 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 louder this time. Rachel's stomach twisted. She spun around and looked toward the window. A figure stood just outside. A man. His clothes were ragged, his face hidden in shadow. His fingers pressed against the glass, tapping rhythmically. Rachel's breath hitched. "Sir, we're closed." The man didn't respond. He just grinned, a slow, unsettling stretch of his lips. Rachel's fingers tightened around the counter. Her mind screamed at her to call someone, but she couldn't move. Her body felt frozen in place. Then he was gone. 1 second he was there, the next just an empty parking lot. The air felt heavy. Rachel's hands shook as she grabbed her phone, her pulse slamming in her ears. She dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, searching the area. Nothing. No footprints, no sign of the man. One of the officers, a tired-looking guy in his 40s, gave Rachel a sympathetic look. "Could have been a drifter," he said. "Sometimes they come off the highway, looking for a place to rest." Rachel swallowed, but he just disappeared. The officer shrugged. "Maybe he took off when he saw you call us. Keep the doors locked. If he comes back, call again." She nodded, but something about the officer's tone told her he didn't really believe her. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. Every shadow seemed darker, every creak of the building louder. By the time the sun rose, Rachel had already made up her mind. She was done with the night shift. A few months later, a new guy named Eric took over. He had heard the stories, but didn't put much stock in them. Just paranoid night shift stuff, he told his co-workers. Then, one stormy night, he was manning the drive-thru when a car pulled up to the speaker. The rain was relentless, hammering against the building. Thunder rolled in the distance. Eric pressed the headset button. "Welcome to Dunkin. What can I get for you?" Silence. He frowned. "Hello." The speaker crackled, a distorted voice barely audible over the storm. "Help me." Eric's stomach dropped. "Sir, are you okay?" Another crackle, then more desperate this time. "Please help me." Chills crawled up Eric's spine. He switched to the security cameras, trying to see the car. What he saw made his blood run cold. A rusted sedan sat at the drive-thru window, its windows fogged up from the rain. There was movement inside, a shadow shifting in the back seat. Eric hesitated. Then, against his better judgment, he grabbed an umbrella and stepped outside. The driver's window rolled down. A man sat there, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. "You have to help me," he pleaded. "There's something in my back seat." Eric's breath hitched. He took a step closer, peering into the darkness of the car. At first he saw nothing, just shadows. Then something moved, a shape barely visible shifting in the back seat. Eric stumbled backward. What the hell? He bolted back inside, locking the door as he dialed 911. By the time the cops arrived, the car was empty. The driver gone. All that remained was an open car door and the lingering scent of something rotten. Years passed. The stories faded into rumors, into urban legend. Employees came and went, some whispering about eerie encounters, others laughing them off. Then came Sarah. She was new, fresh out of high school, working her first closing shift. Midnight came and went without incident, but as she turned off the last of the lights, something caught her eye. A symbol, etched into the floor behind the counter. A crude circle, lined with strange symbols. She shivered. What the hell? Then a whisper, so faint she almost thought she imagined it. Leave. Now. Her heart pounded. She turned, scanning the darkened store. A shadow stood at the entrance, still watching. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Who's there? No answer. Then a low, chilling laugh. Panic surged through her. She grabbed her bag and ran, yanking open the door and sprinting into the parking lot. She never looked back, and she never worked the night shift again. To this day, locals whisper about that Dunkin' Donuts, the place where the night shift reveals things no one should see. I wasn't even supposed to be working that night. It was a little past 8 p.m. when my manager called, asking if I could cover the night shift at Dunkin'. Someone had called out last minute, and since I lived only 10 minutes away, I agreed. The shift ran from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., which I hated, but I needed the extra cash. Our store sat off a lonely highway, the kind of place where truckers, cops, and the occasional night owl would stop in for coffee and donuts. It was usually slow after midnight, maybe a handful of customers an hour. Just me and the quiet hum of the machines. That night, though, felt off from the start. At around 11:30, the door chime rang. I looked up from the register to see a man standing in the doorway. He was tall, mid-20s, wearing a dirty gray hoodie with the hood pulled up, shadowing most of his face. His posture was stiff, his hands hanging limp at his sides. Something about the way he entered set me on edge, like he had no real purpose being there. Hey, how's it going? I greeted, forcing a casual tone. No response. He just walked toward the counter, head slightly tilted down. But his eyes were looking up, staring at me in this unnatural way. It was unsettling. Can I get you something? I tried again. He let out a noise. Not a word, just a loud, guttural grunt. Then another. Almost like he was trying to speak, but couldn't form words. I blinked, unsure how to react. I'd seen plenty of odd customers before. Drunk, high, homeless. But this was different. He wasn't swaying or slurring. He was completely still, making those sounds while staring at me. You okay, man? I asked, glancing toward the door, hoping maybe someone was with him. But the parking lot was empty. No cars, no one else around. The guy just stood there grunting, staring. I felt a weird mix of pity and unease. My older brother has a mental disability, and I've seen him struggle to communicate. Maybe this guy had something similar. Maybe he needed help. Do you need food? I asked, grabbing a donut from the case. Here on the house. I slid the donut across the counter. He didn't move, just kept making those awful sounds. A minute passed, then another. My stomach nodded. All right, you good? I asked again, forcing a chuckle. Just checking. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like forever, he turned around and walked out without a word. Just like that, the automatic doors slid shut. And I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I walked around the counter to look outside, but the guy was already gone. The parking lot stretched empty under the buzzing yellow lights. I tried to shake it off. Probably just some guy passing through. Maybe homeless, maybe struggling with something. Still, I double-checked the locks on the back door just in case. An hour passed. Midnight came and went. Then the phone rang. No one ever called this late. Thanks for calling, Dunkin'. How can I help you? I said, silence. Then through the receiver, I heard it. That same guttural noise. Loud and distorted through the phone speaker. I hung up immediately. My hands clammy against the receiver. My heart pounded as I scanned the store. The parking lot was still empty. The street outside dead quiet. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. I didn't answer this time. Instead, I walked to the front door and peered out into the darkness. The neon glow of our open sign reflected against the glass, making it hard to see beyond the parking lot. Was he out there watching? I told myself I was being paranoid, that he was just some guy messing around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The rest of the shift dragged. Every little noise, the hum of the fridge, the clink of the ice machine made me jump. When 4 a.m. rolled around, I was more than ready to leave. My relief, a guy named Sean came in just as I was clocking out. Yo, you good? He asked, seeing my face. I forced a laugh. Yeah, just a weird night, man. I grabbed my stuff and headed to my car, scanning the lot one last time before driving off. I got home, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. I barely had time to breathe before my phone rang. My heart nearly stopped. I picked it up slowly, hesitating before answering. Hello? A long, heavy silence. Then that same horrible sound. Those grunting, wordless noises. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a thud, and I scrambled to end the call. My whole body was shaking. How did he get my number? How did he know where I lived? I ran to the front window and peeked outside. The street was empty. Everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every shift of the house made my skin crawl. I double-checked the locks on every door, every window. But I still felt watched. Days passed. Then a week. I started to convince myself I had overreacted. Maybe it was some weird prank. Maybe the guy had just dialed random numbers. Then I went to my basement. I don't go down there often, mostly just for storage. But that day, I needed something. The moment I stepped down, I knew something was wrong. Papers were scattered across the floor. Boxes that had been neatly stacked were toppled over. And then I saw it. On the wall, scrawled in black marker, was the name Dunkin' Donuts. Underneath it, my address. And sitting in the corner of the basement, half hidden in the shadows, was a pile of knives. Kitchen knives, a box cutter, a rusted pocket knife. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. Someone had been living down there. Hiding. Watching. I don't remember running up the stairs, but I must have. Because the next thing I knew, I was outside, dialing 911 with shaking hands. Cops came, they searched, but by then, whoever had been staying there was long gone. I never heard those noises again, never saw the man again. But every so often late at night, I swear I feel it. That creeping sensation, like someone's still watching. It was 6:10 a.m. Still dark enough that the streetlights hadn't turned off yet, but the sky was starting to lighten. The air was crisp, carrying that early morning stillness before the city truly woke up. I pulled into the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot like I did almost every morning before work. It was a habit now. Large coffee, 2 creams, no sugar. The place was familiar, a quiet little spot off the highway, next to a gas station. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few cars parked near the entrance. One stood out, a dark-colored old sedan parked a few spaces away from mine. The engine was off, and the windows were tinted. Nothing too strange, but something about it felt off. I shook off the unease and stepped inside. The place smelled like fresh coffee and warm donuts. A couple of early risers were already there. An older man reading a newspaper and a woman in scrubs, probably a nurse coming off a night shift. The cashier, a college-aged guy with tired eyes, gave me a nod. The usual? Yeah. I tapped my card, waited for my coffee, and within a minute I was back outside. That's when I saw him. A man stood by my car right next to the passenger side door. He wasn't leaning on my car, just standing there. Tall, thin, dark hoodie jeans. His hood was up, hands stuffed in his pockets. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't looking around, just standing there, motionless. My gut tightened. I didn't know him. I hadn't seen him inside. I hesitated but kept walking. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. Maybe his car was parked next to mine. I hit the unlock button on my key fob. My car beeped. The lights flashed. He didn't move. I got in, shut the door and locked it immediately. As soon as I started the engine, the passenger door opened. Before I could react, he slid in and shut the door. My breath caught. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word. Just sat there, hands still in his hoodie pockets, staring straight ahead. What the hell? My voice was sharp, breathless. Get out of my car. Nothing. I reached for my phone, but he lunged. His hand shot out, grabbing for the keys in the ignition. I barely had time to react before he yanked them out, pulling them into his lap. Hey! I grabbed his arm, trying to wrestle them back, but he was fast. Too fast. Then I saw it. Something in his other hand. A knife. Small but sharp. He tilted it just enough for me to see the glint of the blade in the dim morning light. Drive, he finally said. My pulse pounded in my ears. I'm not driving you anywhere, I said, keeping my voice firm. The knife shifted slightly in his grip. Not a direct threat, but a warning. Drive. His voice was eerily calm. I glanced toward the Dunkin' Donuts entrance. Too far. If I ran, he could stab me before I even opened the door. My heart hammered as I weighed my options. Fight, scream, run. He must have seen the hesitation in my eyes because he leaned in slightly. Don't make me ask again. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My keys were in his lap. He had all the control. Slowly, I reached for the gear shift. The car rolled forward. I pulled out onto the highway, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Where are we going? My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. He stared ahead. Just drive. I swallowed hard. If I kept driving toward my job, there'd be more cars, more people. Maybe I could signal for help. But then, take the next right. My stomach dropped. The next right led away from the city into isolated back roads. I hesitated. He pressed the knife against my side. Now. I turned right. The road narrowed, streetlights disappearing behind us. I forced my breathing to stay steady. Think. How do you know me? I asked, stalling for time. No response. What do you want? Still nothing. Then pull over. The road was empty, just trees and darkness stretching in both directions. I clenched my teeth. If I stopped now, I was dead. I forced a laugh. If you're stealing the car, just take it, man. No need for the dramatics. He finally turned to look at me. His face was wrong, too thin, eyes too wide, hollow. This isn't about the car, he murmured. Ice crawled up my spine. I was going to die. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching. He lurched forward, unprepared. I moved. I grabbed his wrist, the one with the knife, twisting it hard. He grunted in pain, the knife clattering onto the floor. Before he could react, I elbowed him in the jaw. He shouted, but I was already moving. I threw open the door, scrambling out, my heart pounding. Then bang. I froze. Not a gunshot. The car door slamming. He was coming after me. I turned and ran. The trees blurred past me. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps fast, heavy. I ran harder. Branches scratched my arms. My lungs burned. Then headlights. A car was coming down the road. I stumbled onto the pavement, waving my arms wildly. The car screeched to a stop. The driver, a middle-aged man, jumped out. What the hell? I turned to point behind me, but he was gone. The woods were silent. The police found my car 2 hours later, abandoned deep in the woods. My keys were gone. The knife was missing. But there was something worse, something that made my stomach turn to ice. A mile from where I escaped, they found another car, a dark-colored old sedan. Inside, they found a dead woman, stabbed multiple times. She had been there for hours, long before I ever stopped for coffee. They never found him, no fingerprints, no cameras caught his face. And I still don't know why he got into my car that morning. Did he want a second victim? Or was I just in the wrong place at the wrong time? I don't stop for coffee in the mornings anymore. And every time I unlock my car, I check the passenger seat first. The small town of Brookhaven wasn't known for much. It had a gas station, a pharmacy, and a Dunkin' Donuts that sat right off the main road, glowing like a neon beacon in the night. Open 24 hours, it was a pit stop for truckers, late-night workers, and the occasional drifter passing through. For Emma Dalton, the graveyard shift at Dunkin' wasn't ideal, but she needed the money. Between rent, groceries, and trying to save for community college, she didn't have the luxury of turning down work. Besides, she liked the quiet. The late-night regulars were predictable. An old man who came in for decaf, a trucker who always ordered 2 Boston creams, and the occasional group of teenagers looking for a late-night sugar rush. But there were the rumors. People whispered about strange things happening after midnight. Shadows that moved when no one was there. Customers who ordered coffee but never left. Emma had brushed it off as small-town superstition until she started working there. It was her 3rd week on the job when she noticed something strange. A man came in around 2 a.m. He was tall, wearing a gray hoodie, and his face was obscured by the shadow of his cap. He didn't say a word, just pointed to the menu. "Medium coffee?" Emma asked. The man nodded. She rang him up, filled the cup, and set it on the counter. But when she turned back with his change, he was gone. The door hadn't opened. The chime hadn't sounded. And yet when she looked outside, there was no one in the parking lot. At first, she thought she imagined it. Maybe he'd left quickly, and she hadn't noticed. But when she turned to the counter, the coffee cup was still there, untouched. A chill ran down her spine. Over the next few nights, the strange occurrences continued. The coffee machine would turn on by itself, spitting out a stream of scalding liquid even when no one touched it. The security cameras would glitch, showing static for minutes at a time. One night, she swore she heard whispering coming from the storage room, but when she checked, it was empty. Then came the regulars, the ones who didn't belong. It started with the woman in the red dress. She sat in the corner booth, sipping her coffee, her long black hair covering most of her face. Emma would glance at her occasionally, but something was off. The woman never blinked, she never moved, and when Emma looked away for too long, she would vanish, leaving behind a steaming cup of coffee that was never there before. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was exhaustion, that working nights was messing with her mind. But then the old man came in. Emma had seen him before, a friendly regular who always ordered a blueberry muffin. But tonight, as she handed him his change, his hand brushed against hers. His skin was ice cold. Her breath hitched. "Are you okay, sir?" He looked up, and for the first time she saw his eyes. They were completely black. A slow, unnatural smile spread across his face. "You should leave before they notice you." He whispered, the lights flickered, the air turned freezing, and then he was gone. Emma knew she should quit. Whatever was happening in this Dunkin wasn't normal, but she needed the money. And more than that, she needed answers. She started digging, asking old employees, searching online for any history about the building. What she found sent a shiver through her bones. Years ago, when the Dunkin first opened, there had been a fire. The place had burned down in the middle of the night, trapping 3 employees inside. No one knew how it started. Some claimed it was an accident. Others said it was something else, something darker. The coffee machine had been the only thing left untouched by the fire, and it was still the same one being used today. The final straw came on a stormy night. The wind howled outside, rain battering against the windows. It was past midnight, and the store was empty, except for Emma. Or so she thought. She was refilling the sugar dispensers when she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the storage room. Her heart pounded. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal tray, and stepped toward the door. "Hello." Silence. She reached for the handle, took a deep breath, and pulled it open. The room was empty, but the moment she turned around, a hand grabbed her wrist. She screamed, jerking away. The woman in the red dress was standing inches from her, her hair lifting like it was caught in an invisible wind. Behind her, figures began materializing. The man in the hoodie, the old man, the trucker who always ordered Boston creams. Their faces were hollow, their eyes black voids. "Leave," the woman rasped, "before you become one of us." The lights shattered. The coffee machine screamed. Emma ran. She quit the next morning. She didn't go back for her paycheck. She didn't care. Days later, she drove past the Dunkin. It was open, bright, welcoming as ever. People sat inside, drinking coffee, laughing like nothing had ever happened. But she knew the truth. That place wasn't just haunted. It was cursed, and it was always hungry for more. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries clung to the air, a comforting scent that had become second nature to Evelyn during her late shifts at Joe's Donuts. It wasn't a big place, just a small 24-hour donut shop off the highway, the kind of spot where truckers and night owls stopped for a quick caffeine fix. That night, the store had been mostly empty, save for a few regulars who had trickled in and out. By the time the clock neared 9 p.m., Evelyn's 2 co-workers had already left, leaving her to close up alone. It wasn't her first time doing it, but something about the quiet felt off. She shook the feeling off and wiped down the last of the tables, humming softly to the old rock song playing from the radio. Just another night. Then came the first knock. Soft, deliberate. Evelyn froze mid-wipe, her gaze flicking toward the glass doors. A man stood just outside, still as a statue, staring in. He wasn't a regular, not someone she recognized. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up, his face obscured by shadows. Her stomach twisted, the store was closed. There was no reason for anyone to be knocking. She hesitated before stepping closer, just enough to see if he would say anything. But he didn't. He just stood there, his head tilting slightly as if studying her. Evelyn forced herself to breathe. "It's fine. Just tell him we're closed." She unlocked the front door, but kept the chain latched and cracked it open just an inch. "Sorry, we're closed." The man didn't respond. He didn't move. A chill ran down her spine. "Sir?" Then he did something that made her skin crawl. He grinned. A slow, deliberate smile that sent every instinct in her body screaming at her to shut the door. Evelyn didn't wait. She slammed it and locked it tight, backing away from the entrance. For a moment there was nothing, just silence. Then bang, the man slammed his hand against the glass. Not hard enough to break it, but enough to make her flinch. Her heart pounded. He did it again and again. The rhythm was slow, calculated. She stumbled back, grabbing her phone from the counter. Her hands trembled as she dialed. "Come on, pick up, pick up." The line rang. Then movement. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw him shift, but not away, around. He was heading toward the side of the building, toward the back entrance. Her blood turned to ice. She turned on her heel and sprinted toward the back door, her sneakers squeaking against the tile. The heavy metal door was locked, but was it enough? Her fingers fumbled with the deadbolt, making sure it was secure. Then, just as she stepped back, another knock. This time on the back door. The breath left her lungs. He had made it around fast, too fast. The phone was still ringing in her hand when someone finally picked up. 911, what's your emergency? Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, trying to steady her voice. "There's a man outside my store. He won't leave. He's trying to get in." The operator's voice remained calm. "Are the doors locked?" "Yes." "Is he armed?" I don't know." She glanced toward the small window in the door, but he wasn't there anymore. Her stomach churned. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are on their way." Evelyn nodded, even though they couldn't see her. Her knuckles turned white around the phone. She could still hear her own breathing. Too fast, too shallow. Then the lights flickered. A split second. Barely noticeable, but it was enough. And then the power went out. The store plunged into darkness. Evelyn's breath hitched as she pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering in her chest. The neon glow from the Joe's Donut sign outside cast eerie shadows against the windows, barely enough light to see. The 911 operator's voice crackled through the phone. "Miss, are you still there?" Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing herself to respond. "Yeah, the power just went out." A brief pause. "Then is there another exit?" She knew there was, but it wasn't an option. Only the front and back doors. "He's still out there. I don't know where." Silence stretched. Then tap, tap, tap. Her blood ran cold. The sound was coming from the drive-through window. Evelyn turned her head slowly, her entire body rigid with fear. In the dim light, she could barely make out the outline of a face peering in through the glass. The man was grinning again, his fingers drumming lightly against the window. He knew she could see him. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Please," she whispered into the phone, "tell them to hurry." "They're on their way." The operator assured her, "Stay where you are. Do not engage." Evelyn's grip tightened around the phone. The man's grin widened, and then he reached for the drive-through handle. Her stomach dropped. The window was locked. It had to be. But was it enough? She darted forward, grabbing a mop handle from the supply closet, just in case. The man yanked the handle once, twice. A third time. The lock held. For now. But then he did something that made Evelyn's knees nearly give out. He pulled a key from his pocket. Her vision blurred for a second. No, that wasn't possible. How did he have a key? Her mind raced. Had he worked here before? Stolen it from someone? The thought made her stomach churn. She had seconds before he figured out if it still worked. Not thinking, Evelyn spun around and bolted toward the office in the back. The emergency exit. It had an alarm. If she pushed it, it would make noise. Maybe enough to scare him off. Her hand barely grazed the door handle when bang, glass shattered. Her body jerked at the sound, and she whipped around just in time to see his arm reaching through the broken drive-through window. He was inside. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. "He's in the store." She gasped into the receiver. "Stay calm," the operator urged. "The police are almost there. Do you have anything to barricade yourself with?" Evelyn's mind raced. The supply closet. It wasn't ideal, but it had a lock. It was her best bet. She lunged toward it, shoving herself inside and slamming the door shut just as heavy footsteps sounded behind the counter. She fumbled for the lock, twisting it until she heard a click. Her chest heaved. Outside, the man's footsteps slowed, and then silence. Evelyn covered her mouth to stifle her breathing. The only sound was the pounding in her ears. Then a slow, deliberate scratch against the door. Her whole body went rigid. He was right there. She bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. A pause. Then, in the quietest voice imaginable, he whispered her name. "Evelyn." Her stomach lurched. No. He wasn't just some random stranger. He knew her. How? Her thoughts spiraled, but she had no time to process. Sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Flashing blue and red lights danced against the wall through the tiny supply closet vent. The scratching stopped. Then running. He was making a break for it. Evelyn waited until she heard the front door slam open, followed by hurried footsteps and shouting voices. Sheriff's department. Her breath hitched. She fumbled for the lock, her fingers barely working. When she finally wrenched the door open, 2 uniformed officers stood at the front of the shop, flashlights sweeping across the ruined drive-through window. She staggered forward. "He was here," she choked out. "He had a key." One officer approached her, his expression serious. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but she wasn't sure it was true. She didn't feel like the same person anymore. "Did you see which way he went?" The second officer asked. Evelyn swallowed hard. He ran." The officers exchanged glances before one of them stepped outside, radioing for backup. The other stayed with her, his voice softer now. "Do you know who he was?" She hesitated. But he knew me." The words sent a shiver down her own spine. The officer nodded grimly. We'll check the security footage. In the meantime, I suggest you stay somewhere else for the night. Evelyn exhaled shakily. She didn't need to be told twice. As she was escorted outside, she glanced back at the shattered drive-through window, at the glass glinting under the fluorescent lights. Whoever he wasn't done with her. And somehow, deep down, she knew he'd be back. The cold night air hit Evelyn's face as she stepped outside, flanked by the two officers. The flashing red and blue lights cast eerie shadows over the parking lot, making everything feel surreal, like she was stuck in some waking nightmare. Her hands still shook. Her heartbeat hadn't slowed. Even with the police here, she felt exposed, like he was still watching. The officer who had been questioning her, a man named Deputy Monroe, turned toward his partner. Check the perimeter. If he had a car, it's probably gone by now, but let's be sure. The other officer nodded and walked off, flashlights sweeping across the empty lot. Monroe turned back to Evelyn. You said he had a key. She swallowed, her throat dry. Yeah, I don't know how. Monroe frowned. Does anyone else have a spare key to the building? Old employees, maybe? Evelyn's stomach twisted. I don't know, maybe the old manager, but he left months ago. Could be a stolen key, Monroe muttered, making a note in his pad. We'll pull security footage, see if we can get a clear shot of his face. She nodded, but deep down, she knew the cameras wouldn't be much help. The shadows, the hoodie, the way he knew where to go, what to do. It all felt deliberate. This wasn't random, and that was the part that scared her the most. Monroe's radio crackled. No sign of him, his partner reported. Looks like he slipped into the woods behind the gas station. Monroe exhaled sharply. Figures. He turned back to Evelyn. Listen, I don't think you should go home alone tonight. Do you have someone you can stay with? Evelyn nodded slowly. Yeah, my friend Lisa. She lives a few blocks from here. Good. Stay there for the night. We'll have patrols sweep the area, but keep your doors locked, okay? She didn't need to be told twice. With shaky hands, she grabbed her things from inside the store, her purse, her keys, the jacket she had left hanging by the break room door. The place felt different now, not the familiar cozy little shop she had worked at for months. It felt tainted, like something was waiting, watching. By the time she got to her car, she forced herself to take deep breaths, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She checked the back seat twice before pulling out of the lot. Just get to Lisa's. Just get somewhere safe. The drive only took 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Every passing car made her tense. Every shadow on the sidewalk made her pulse spike. When she finally pulled up to Lisa's apartment, she wasted no time. She locked her car, rushed up the steps, and knocked in quick, frantic taps. Lisa answered almost immediately. Evelyn? Her brows furrowed as she took in Evelyn's pale face. What happened? Evelyn stepped inside, locking the door behind her before letting out a shaky breath. Someone tried to break in while I was closing. He knew my name, Lisa. Lisa's face drained of color. What? Who was it? I don't know, Evelyn whispered, but I think he's been watching me. Lisa pulled her into a tight hug. You're safe now, okay? We'll figure this out. Evelyn nodded against her friend's shoulder, but deep down, she wasn't sure she believed it. Because as she glanced toward the window, for just a split second, she swore she saw movement outside, a shadow disappearing into the night. Watching, waiting, and she knew this wasn't over.